Well, will they or won't they? There's an inevitability that the Reserve Bank will soon start pushing up interest rates. But will it be at this Tuesday's board meeting? To get an insider's view, I spoke to Paul Bloxham, who's just left the Reserve Bank after 12 years of top-level policy advice to plunge into the private sector as HSBC's chief economist for Australia and New Zealand. Well, Paul, you don't think interest rates are going to go up this week. Firstly, why is that? And secondly, does that mean they'll definitely go up in November?
I think that's obviously a close call as to whether they go up this week or they go in November. And but my broad view is that they will go up by the end of the year by 25 basis points, as I've set out in my first note that I put out last week. I think interest rates need to rise in this country because the outlook for the economy is very strong, and we're starting this next upswing with inflation at a relatively elevated level.
In fact, do you think interest rates are going to go up by 1.25% by the end of next year, which is quite a lot?
And that's what I have in mind, yes.
And why is that? I mean, is Australia's economy that strong that it needs that much slowing down?
Well, the outlook for the resources sector is very strong. And, of course, everything can't grow at once in an economy, otherwise it puts upward pressure on inflation. So, given the amount of investment that's going to happen in the resources sector, indeed has already started and just needs to be finished in the resources sector, other parts of the economy need to grow a bit more slowly in order for that to happen.
Because what everyone thinks is that you really know what's going on because you've just come from 12 years at the Reserve Bank to join HSBC. So, do you?
Well, if by that you mean, do I understand how the Reserve Bank thinks about monetary policy? I have spent the last 12 years sitting inside the Reserve Bank, being a part of the policy process, giving advice to the Governor and the senior officials. If you mean I have some sort of inside line on information,
yes.
That's not the case.
You don't have any inside line?
I resigned from the bank 3 months ago, and I've been outside the building since the 6th of August.
OK, but you do understand how they think and what the approach to monetary policy is. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, I think the Reserve Bank's approach to monetary policy is very pragmatic, very practical. If you compare the way the Reserve Bank thinks about the way the economy works, they don't spend a lot of time tinkering with very complicated models that often rely on, complicated features and complicated parameters. Rather, they spend a lot of time looking at the data and actually trying to make a good assessment of what's going on.
So what was your job there? What was your contribution to that pragmatism, if I can put it that way?
Well, I had a range of jobs over that 12 years, all within the economic analysis department. In my final few years with the bank, I headed up the overseas economy section at one point in time, and in the last few years I headed up the financial conditions section. In fact, that was a very interesting time to be head of the financial conditions section because of the global financial crisis.
Giving advice, assessing what the financial conditions were in the financial sector, and then providing that advice to the Governor and the board.
That was certainly a part of my role, yes.
One thing that's striking about the Australian Reserve Bank is that whereas other countries in the world, particularly Japan and Brazil at the moment, are worried about their exchange rate rising, the Australian Central Bank doesn't seem to be worried, and they're certainly not talking about it. What's going on there?
I think your point is valid, and that is that the Reserve Bank's approach to dealing with the exchange rate is quite different to many other central banks. I think the Reserve Bank thinks of the exchange rate as a shock absorber, a good part of the economy that adjusts to shocks that come along. You think back to the global financial crisis, the exchange rate depreciated very sharply and provided support for the economy. And now the opposite is happening. The exchange rate is appreciating, and that is helping to slow parts of the economy down so that other parts of the economy can grow. It's helping to hold down inflation.
And is it therefore resulting, do you think, or will result in fewer interest rate increases than would otherwise happen?
I think that's certainly true than would otherwise happen. Although, in my view, we will probably both get some exchange rate appreciation, and it will be necessary for interest rates to rise as well.
Do you think it's fair to say that the Australian Reserve Bank has more faith in the market, the foreign exchange market, and the way it operates than perhaps other countries do?
I think that's probably a reasonable point to make. I think it's also the case that raising interest rates is very hard to do, especially in this country with a large amount of mortgages being at variable rates. 85% odd of mortgages are at variable rates. Increasing interest rates is hard work. If the exchange rate does some of the work for you in terms of slowing some parts of the economy down, I think that's regarded as a good thing.
Right, so looking at everything, Australian interest rates and what the Reserve Bank is likely to do, plus the other things that are going on, do you think the Australian dollar will go to parity and beyond?
I think it's a pretty reasonable call. Forecasting is obviously very difficult to do, and you can often be wrong, but I think it would be reasonable to expect that the Aussie dollar goes to parity and maybe beyond.
Thanks for joining us, Paul.
No problem.